Okay, all set? Hello everyone, my name is Peter Elnegard. I'm coming from SimpliVity. As you can see here, you might know this in advance, we've been acquired by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I'm very happy to welcome you here today to learn more about SimpliVity, what it is we do, and how we can help simplify your data center infrastructure and make everything a lot more efficient. I hope you have your supply of cake, coffee, water. If not, maybe this is the time to get it. Otherwise, we'll kick it off. So today's agenda, as you can see, the welcome is basically me saying welcome and everybody getting settled. So that's almost over. Then I'll spend the next hour introducing you to SimpliVity. What is it the technology does? What is the purpose of the technology? And a little bit about how it works. We're not going to go totally deep dive. But if you have questions, please raise them. After that, we have a little break, and then we'll actually show you how the solution works. And this is an important thing to understand what SimpliVity is. As you can hear, SimpliVity, simplicity, it's supposed to be very simple. Instead of me just telling you it's very simple, we will show you how simple it is. That will be done by my esteemed colleague, Thomas. He's our Senior Vice President of Solution Architecture in Europe. And if there's someone who has really, really technical questions, he is probably the best person in SimpliVity to ask them to. After that, we have some guests, some visitors from Össur, would be the name. This is Einar and a few others from the team over there, and they'll actually tell you how they're using SimpliVity today to simplify their operations. They're actually running what would normally be a very complicated architecture, but it's running quite simple, quite smooth. We'll have Einar Clemensson from Össur to tell you how they're using SimpliVity today to get the most out of their infrastructure. So, if we kick it off, then to bring a little context into everything we're doing, I think most of you, especially if you're in IT operations or IT infrastructure, you're probably seeing a growing tendency to your customers, your developers, whatever, to basically require faster services. So when it says you want faster IT up here, it has nothing to do with performance. Performance is a given. Of course, if you have an application and you want it to perform well, that's something everybody understands, but that's not the issue here. When somebody comes to you and asks you, can I please get this service? There's only one real answer, and that is yes. And then when they ask, when can I have it? The answer should be now. So that pressure is building on the IT organizations to deliver faster IT services, and obviously these services has to be stable, available, high performing. That's coming over to the second bullet here. That basically the choices you make in the infrastructure has an impact to the way you can deliver IT to your end users. And it's not very often that the infrastructure departments are very good at communicating what the actual value of the choices they made, what it comes down to. So one thing is obviously to empower yourself to do things faster, deliver services faster. You could argue, at least for large organizations, that would require maybe a level of automation, orchestration. If you only have 30 VMs, maybe you're not spending a lot of time automating. If you have 300 or 5 or 3,000, then the work to automate your workflows, those resources have to come from somewhere. And if you're spending all your time managing your infrastructure, then either you need more resources to do the automation, or you need to do something more clever in your infrastructure to free up resources that can help you deliver IT faster. Then obviously there's the very specific thing, and that's just IT not working. I mean, maybe people are not very good at communicating what the infrastructure does, but the organization will certainly figure it out the second it becomes unavailable. So making the right choices in terms of having solid architectures for high availability, for disaster recoverability, for application recoverability, those are certainly choices that will help your organization eventually if something unplanned happens. And then normally when I present the last bullet, the 80%, I have yet to meet a customer who disagrees with me. So what's meant here is that if you look at the way IT is being run, expanded, managed overall, then most organizations would use around 80% of their entire resources, their people, their money, their facilities, whatever, just to keep the lights on for the IT that's already running. And then I had a customer, a very big Danish telco, you might know them, they're called TDC. They said to me, oh, but Peter, listen, those 80%, that's what makes our business. That's the reason why we can send out invoices and we can automate things in our network and all that stuff. So we need that 80%. So I said, yes. Does that mean you would prefer that it would be 100%? And then he kind of twitched a little back and forth and said, no. So can we agree that the lower we can make the number, just keeping the lights on, the more resources can be freed up to actually bringing new business, new opportunities, developing opportunities inside the IT organization, spending the money where you actually drive the business forward instead of just being reactive all the time and just having the light turned on for whatever you're running at the moment. So we have definitely ways to address that number, and hopefully today you'll see how SimpliVity can simplify a lot of things to get resources freed up to do something which is a lot more beneficial from the budgets and resources available. And I think also I can say, Anna, you will touch a little bit about on that in terms of what Usher is doing. Then when I created these presentations, or my peers did in the beginning, on your left, my right, it basically said growth in data. And we're seeing, obviously, that's the case. Everybody knows data is growing like crazy. That all has implication on the infrastructure. You know, when you have to expand your infrastructure, it gets increasingly complex. But that's just one aspect. When data grows or explodes, sometimes it gets more and more difficult to live up to your SLAs that you're committing back to the business. So how fast can I do a disaster recovery if something fails? Well, if I have 1 terabyte of data and I have to manage that, that's one thing. Tomorrow, maybe you have 2. The day after, you have 4 terabytes. So does the SLAs or your service level agreements that you commit back to the business, does that really, does that stack up over time when data actually grows? It gets more and more difficult to recover applications fast the more data you have. And that's certainly something to address, and this is something we will address today. But more importantly, we're also seeing that the sheer number of applications is growing. And that's coming back to the bullet on the left from the previous slide, that we definitely see, like, whenever somebody has an idea, they want an app for it for some reason. I have an idea, let's go make an app. So we see the actual amount of applications is growing as well. And we also saw some examples that whenever you have an infrastructure that facilitate those dynamics that you can deliver very fast, people will actually start consuming them very fast too. So the better and more agile you can make your infrastructure, the better you can support your business. And I don't think it's a goal in itself to drive the number of applications up, but if somebody has a good idea, then it's certainly worth pursuing. And I can give you an example of the opposite, actually. Does anyone here, are you familiar with Danske Bank? Big Danish bank, probably the second largest in Denmark after Nordea. Actually, the biggest Danish bank, and then Nordea is the biggest one in Scandinavia. With Danske Bank, they created an application called Mobile Pay. Have you ever heard about it? Yeah? Basically, when they asked their service provider, which was IBM at the time, could you please deliver us a virtual server? Yeah? Not a physical, I really must stress this. This is not a physical server. Can you please deliver a virtual server? How long would you say the delivery time for that server was? Just guess, someone? Well, it's actually half that. It's 1.5 months. To get a virtual server, I mean, it's just insane. You would think you could acquire a physical server, spin it up in your data center, and you would still have saved 2 weeks. But that wasn't the case. It was taking forever. And the consequence was that the developers of Mobile Pay did not develop Mobile Pay in-house. Do you know where they developed it, by the way? Azure was the answer, and the correct answer, by the way. So that's the strength of having an infrastructure which is agile and fast. And the consequences, if you don't do it, somebody else does. But you won't even get asked. It's just move to Azure or Amazon or Google or whatever. So that's the strength, and we need to be able to support you guys to support your people. So that's probably the most important aspects here. Speeds up the consequence. And I'm not going to say too much more about the other stuff, other than we see a definite increasing trend that if people or IT organizations want to have their infrastructure and they want to have it on-premise, then there's definitely a movement in the market towards hyper-converged infrastructure. It goes without saying. Obviously, growing 80% when your starting point is not very big, that's not very difficult. We don't have billions and billions of dollars worth of revenue in this area yet. But we're actually seeing that the normal storage systems, like the Nimbles and just mid-range storage systems from EMC and NetApp and all these guys, slowly declining, not growing anymore. Maybe one quarter will grow by 1%, slowly declining. And for high-end storage systems, like the VMAXs and the XPs from HP, just completely plummeting, like cut in half over even just a few years. So there's a definite movement in the market to do things more smart. And this is obviously where we come in. So in order to understand what SimpliVity is, it's actually very useful to go on a little bit of a journey to see what has happened inside data center infrastructure. So if somebody here was to build a data center infrastructure for your virtual environment that would handle enterprise class applications, most of you, and certainly all of the customers I speak to, with very few exceptions, will build it using either all or at least most of the building blocks in this picture. So you have your servers with your hypervisors on it. You have your storage network, something from Brocade or Cisco or whatever. You have your shared storage, your, I don't know, Nimble, 3-Power, EMC, doesn't matter. You have some sort of backup appliance to store your data, because obviously you're not going to go into production on your enterprise class application without protecting it. You would need a piece of protection software from Veeam or Commvault, Data Protector, Avamar from EMC, it doesn't matter. And then maybe, not a lot of people have this, but maybe you do some SSD caching, some application performance optimization. If you have a lot of remote offices, chances are that you will also have some sort of WAN optimization. Having all these thin lines and optimizing them is actually very expensive, so most people would go for some sort of WAN optimization if you were to transfer data between sites. So most would have at least, I'll say, 5 of these entities here. And if you just start counting just to make the complexity a little bit more evident, you'll have 1 management tool per server vendor, by the way. We can just say 1 here. 1 for the hypervisor, like vCenter, 1, 2, 3 management tool, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, maybe 8. Just 8 management tools, just keeping your enterprise architecture running. That's one thing. Obviously, that requires resources. It also requires skills. The bigger this environment becomes, the more dynamic they tend to be, the more skilled the staff managing it would obviously have to be. So that in itself is a task, and that's where part of those 80% is going. It's just managing stuff which is already there, keeping the skills up to date and all that stuff, getting people trained and all. But for me, that's mostly a resource and cost thing. Obviously, that's important because nobody has unlimited funds, but there's an inherent complexity in this stack. So when you acquire data center infrastructure, you're not buying something, you set it up, and then you leave it alone for 5 years or so. That's not how it works. Most will have changing requirements during the time of this architecture. So VMware will come along, they will introduce VMware 6.5 or something. You haven't touched your environment in a few years, you find out, oh, the firmware in my QLogic host bus adapters, I'll need to upgrade it. Well, somebody needs to check that whenever you do upgrades and you do changes inside this stack, that those changes will actually work together. So that's one thing that you have to allocate time to do, and you have to evaluate whether there's risk in doing the change. Because worst case, if you upgrade the firmware here in the server layer and it doesn't work with the Brocade firmware in the switches, then potentially you lose all access to your data, and then all your services become unavailable. This is not why you acquired your infrastructure to begin with. You want to deliver stable services. And obviously, if you want to do this in a disaster recovery scenario, then you have to duplicate all of this, which even increases the complexity more. So those are the inherent risks and complexity of how things are done today. Then I think we can attribute the honor to EMC. saying we must be able to do this in a more simple way. So they created a joint venture with Cisco and VMware. They called it VCE, VMware Cisco EMC. Now it stands for the Virtual Compute Environment. And basically what they said is that we must be able to package this part of the infrastructure. Everything that's running our hypervisor, running our virtual machines, we can basically do that in one reference architecture. You buy it from us, we'll put one rack, or 5 racks for that matter, in your data center, and it'll be running VMware when you get it. They solved 2 things doing this. First of all, they would deliver it as a completed solution, with your VMs provisioned and it's all ready to run. So that's one thing, so you didn't have to spend resources putting everything together, doing the zoning in the SAN and all that stuff. That was already done for you. What they didn't say was it would took you 45 working days to get it. So from when you bought it to you got it, take 2 months. So when you saved the resources, you certainly didn't have to do it yourself. That was one thing. The other thing, which I think was much more interesting and much more important actually, was that they guaranteed that any change in this stack would be interoperable, be certified, made sure that all changes made inside the stack would always work together. And that's an important thing, because that takes the risk away. You don't have to spend time evaluating where a change is going to impose risk. And obviously, if you reduce risk, then that's a good thing. I mean, that you can't take that away from them. That was a good thing. What wasn't as good is they completely ignored the remainder of the stack. Yes, you can buy there's not a hyperconverged, it's just an integrated system from EMC, where there's a data domain system and some software to run the backups. But they're still just bolted on. They just put them in there and then that's it. Still have to manage them. And that actually goes for the whole stack still. You still have to manage backup software, still have to manage backup appliances, still have to manage a storage system and a SAN and servers and a hypervisor. There's no changes at all. So the resources spent to keep this up and running would not be significantly different from this one over here. But they did reduce a little bit of the risk and the complexity. We have to give them that. But pretty much ignored half of it. Then somebody said at one point, we must be able to do this more clever. If I'm running my virtual environment, I already have compute resources, CPUs, and some servers. I have some memory, some RAM. The only thing I'm missing to run my hypervisor is some storage capacity. So if I can do something clever with some storage and maybe just put a bunch of disks in these servers and then do some sort of virtual storage, I don't know, virtual storage array, some sort of capacity, then basically we have all the components to run a virtual infrastructure. So that was the beginning of hyperconverged infrastructure. That's how it began. We were there right at the beginning, so we were actually founded pretty much, I think, in the same month that Nutanix was. The only difference is they spent 18 months developing their product. We spent 43, I think. And then you ask yourself, why on earth would we spend 43 if somebody could do it twice as fast? And the question is answered by looking at the bottom half. They completely ignored some of the most important things in an enterprise architecture. How do you want to do disaster recovery? We changed the battery, so it should be okay. How can we do efficient data protection application recovery? And that was basically a question that was completely ignored by VMware when they created vSAN, from Nutanix and all these guys, because either there are no built-in protection mechanisms or they're very, very lacking of functionality, to say the least. And that brings us to SimpliVity. So what is it basically SimpliVity is? Well, we basically addressed the whole stack. And what's important to understand is that SimpliVity is not a virtualization of all these devices. We basically redefined and created a data management platform that could run on your standard x86 platform, the DL380 servers from HPE. Use the data management platform to provide all the services you get out of this stack, but completely eliminated the individual components. And this is very important to understand. We do not run virtual switches or virtual storage or virtual backup appliances or virtual WAN optimization somewhere in there. We completely redefined what it takes to run a virtual environment. And then we got rid of all of this stack. This is basically what we did. And how we do it obviously is interesting. This is what we're here to talk about. So this data management platform is very, very powerful. It has some very, very significant attributes. There are 3 of them. The platform is called the Data Virtualization Platform, and it has these 3 attributes which always are in place. First of it, data deduplication and compression, we call it data efficiency. You can ask, so why is that important? Well, obviously you want to save some capacity inside your infrastructure, but that's actually one of the least important things about our deduplication. If you can see the picture up here, is a picture of the world, and we have our various data centers with SimpliVity in them. So one of the consequences of us deduplicating data at all times is that if we want to create some sort of relation replicating maybe a VM from North America to Europe, like I think Aina is going to speak about a little later, if you want to create that relation, and we know we deduped the data and we deduped it when it got created, then we know whatever data we transfer is always going to be optimized. We're always going to transfer the least amount of possible data. And this is one of the good examples of what SimpliVity does. So I know there's a colleague of mine, a HP colleague of mine, he got the question when we were doing the HP Discover in Copenhagen, or north of Copenhagen. He said, so what does the WAN optimization interface look like? And he was a little bit like, Peter, I wish you were there because I couldn't answer the question. The real answer to the question is, well, there is no WAN optimization interface, because what we did is that we completely eliminated the requirement to have WAN optimization. That's what the deduplication did. So when we say we have WAN optimization, it's actually not true. We just eliminated the requirement for WAN optimization, completely got rid of it. That's what we did. And that's one of the strengths of the platform. So one of the things we do, and data deduplication plays a significant role here. Same thing with our built-in resiliency, high availability, disaster recovery, backups, extremely simple to manage and very, very powerful. So basically, we would argue that if you have a SimpliVity platform, you would start protecting your data a lot better. And this is one of the things that we also show you in the demo, how exactly that is done. And then everything we do in terms of managing the solutions, always done on a VM level. We don't manage infrastructure, we don't manage SAN or storage or LUNs or anything. We only manage virtual machines or groups of virtual machines. Many, thousands. We can manage 1,000 VMs at the time, defining backup policies and disaster recovery policies and so forth. All done on a VM level. If we dive a little bit into the capabilities, so the first point about the data efficiency, as you can see here, it's basically always turned on. So we do deduplication and compression of all data, always. There's no exceptions. The feature is always turned on. And we do it, here it says at inception. Some people call it inline deduplication. So the second that the data is created, we will deduplicate it. And that's also why we got the advantage I described before with the data communication between sites. We always know we have the least amount of data to transfer. Another interesting thing is, in order to make sure that we always have the adequate horsepower, the resources to do the deduplication, one of the things we invented wasn't just a piece of software. We actually invented an accelerator card that would help us make sure that we always had the available resources to do the deduplication. So we can say confidently, we know we always have enough resources to do deduplication. And that is certainly not all hyperconverged vendors who can say that. So you can put as much pressure on our platform as you want, it's still going to go dedupe and compression no matter what. And that's important. Then we actually guarantee what we call 90% data efficiency. That's 10-to-1 deduplication across backup and primary storage. So it's, you can't give me 10 terabytes worth of video data and I can compress it down to 1. That's not how it works. You give me 10 terabytes worth of file data and we start protecting it like we suggest, and you'll get definitely 10-to-1. I think Ursula is getting 15-to-1 or something. Yeah. Say again? It depends on the data. Some data will deduplicate and compress well, some not so well. But on average, actually, our customers are getting roughly 40-to-1. That's one of the consequences of doing deduplication and backup the way we do. Another interesting attribute of the whole deduplication, actually, we can eliminate IOs in the infrastructure, which means that most of our customers will see an up to 50% improvement in their application performance. Most people think that's pretty interesting. So, if you ask me, this is probably the most interesting attribute of the SimpliVity platform, because yes, we can do things simpler, better, more cost efficient and stuff, but sometimes that's not the overall priority. If you want to go out and start committing better SLAs back to your organizations, this is basically where you should start looking. So one of the things we do, we always do full backups of all VMs we protect. That's one thing. So if you recover a VM, you recover the entire VM. Done very efficiently. Not many news there. A lot of backup software can do that. But what most can't do is do really fast restores. And we will actually commit in what we call our hyper guarantee that we can restore 1 terabyte worth of data in less than 60 seconds. You'll actually see Thomas demo this, and the truth is we're probably closer to 10 seconds. So imagine 1 terabyte file server just vanishes from the face of the earth. They call you to fix the problem. You can have it fixed in maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds. We will take maybe 10 seconds to recover data. You will then have to do some networking afterward to get things running. But our part of the infrastructure, we do our job in that amount of time. And that's what most organizations think is really interesting. Like, we will start saying, why not, if we can do backup really efficiently, we don't use a lot of extra space, we can do it without any application impact, depending on the application, MS SQL, very little impact maybe, but not much. Why not consider starting to take more backups? Why not? If it doesn't require any more space, why not consider it? And that's bringing us back to are everyone familiar with these terms, RTO and RPO? So RTO is recovery time objective. The amount of time it takes me to get back into production after I've lost my data. It could be 1 hour, it could be 1 day. Say most IT organizations, they have 24 hours. So from when something goes wrong until I'm back, mostly it's 24 hours committed. But remember from before, when the amount of data starts growing, then maybe the data you could recover today in 24 hours is probably not the same amount of time you need to recover twice the amount tomorrow. And that's a problem. Recovery point objectives, that's basically how much data in time can I afford to lose? And most organizations will say this is around 24 hours because of committed to the business, I will do 1 daily backup. And then you only have to imagine, if I do my backup at night, I do production all day, creating new data, creating lots of new interesting ideas, and then something goes wrong here before the next backup, then you have to roll back to the previous backup in order to get your data back, and all the data that was created in that period will now be gone because you only had the backup from 24 hours ago. And that's something where we strongly suggest you should break with this paradigm. You should maybe do hourly backups. Maybe for critical applications, do 10-minute backups. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, because if you imagine what most organizations do today, at least most I speak to, also what we were promoting when I was with EMC, just imagine the process you have to go through when you want to recover an application. So, let's take a pretty normal scenario. You're a good guy, you thought about things, spoke to VMware, and you got a Veeam solution for your backup. That's what 9 out of 10, at least smaller companies are doing. You got your Veeam solution, and one of the reasons why you got it was basically now you can instant access your application if you have to recover it. Yeah? All right, so try and think about what actually needs to happen in order to recover that data. Somebody would have to call up the backup administrator. Okay, we'll see. He gets the call. Well, actually, he has to have a whole infrastructure in place to support what I'm talking about. But let's say they already set this up, it's all good. Then the request comes in from the DBA, please recover my 1 terabyte database. So what needs to happen? You say, oh, I'm the Veeam guy, I'm really clever, I'm gonna instant access this database over on my backup system. Well, that's all very fine. Now maybe you can ping this VM. So this is your web shop and you're having really a lot of traffic. I don't think the users are going to be too happy at the moment you running your web shop off your backup system. The larger the database is, the longer time it's going to take to transfer it from your backup environment, because eventually you have to do this, and over to your production environment. The bigger the database, the longer the time. And all that time you're moving the data, probably doing a storage vMotion in VMware, you're basically compromising your application performance. Maybe that's 4 hours, maybe that's 8 hours, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, once you're done, now on your production system, you have a 24-hour-old copy of your database. So what needs to happen then? Then somebody has to get hold of the DBA, has to start rolling on the log files for the past 24 hours. This is going to take another 4, 5, 6 hours, and then you're done. So that's 8 hours going from here to here, and then maybe 4 to 8 hours going to get the application up and running again. In SimpliVity, if you're doing 10-minute backups, you recover that data in 10 seconds on your production platform, and then your DBA do 10 minutes worth of afterwork, and then you're completely recovered. That's some of the value that SimpliVity brings to the picture here. And by the way, if you wanted to do this whole process as a disaster recovery instead, it works exactly the same in SimpliVity. We actually don't distinguish between backups and disaster recovery. You configure it, and actually Thomas will show you, it's completely the same thing for us. It's completely the same thing. It's just a matter of where, it's basically a matter of the locality of your backup. Do I store it locally, or do I store it on my disaster recovery site? And you can do this quite easily, and this actually brings me on to the next point very elegantly. All this I'm describing here, when you do this in SimpliVity, you're basically just managing VMs using policies. So Thomas will show you, but it's basically, you right-click a VM saying, I want to define a protection schedule for this VM. Daily backups, I keep them for 30 days. I want 10-minute backups, keep them for 12 hours. And then I want hourly backups that I send to my disaster recovery site somewhere else. It's all in the same policy. It's just a matter of where you're putting the backup. It's all VM-centric. We do not manage any volumes or shares or LUNs or any infrastructure exercise that you know from your current infrastructure. Simply doesn't exist. If you want, I say capacity management in our solution is create a VMware data store, delete a VMware data store, shrink it, expand it. That's it. All the other LUNs and zonings and SAN and disaster recovery, synchronous LUN pairing and all that stuff, it's gone. And another important thing, when we do all this, we use native tools. So the platform is currently available for VMware. It's going to come out for Hyper-V very shortly. And everything we do when we manage these VMs is done through the native management tools. So for VMware, it's vCenter, and for Hyper-V, it's going to be System Center Virtual Machine Manager, SCVMM. It's completely tools that any IT generalists are used to working with, you can use to manage this platform. It's that simple. And then obviously for the organizations who have a lot of different data centers with infrastructure maybe throughout the world, you get a single pane of glass where you can see everything, and you're going to see that in the demo as well. It's very, very neat overview, and it definitely reduces the complexity in managing a lot of different sites. Okay, so before we show you, I'll show you a little bit. I'll show you what we believe is the difference between SimpliVity and other hyperconverged vendors. I'm not going to go too much into details, but I think maybe some of you heard of Nutanix. They were some of the first in the market. The VxRail is basically a vSAN appliance from Dell EMC. And if you ask us, you're not done. If you want to run an enterprise class architecture with your mission critical applications, you're going to need all these add-on tools. And I can explain actually very specifically in detail what each of those tools are doing. And I can also tell you there are actually tools missing as well, because it doesn't end there. Does anyone know VxRail, how they do VM replication? There's another EMC product called Recovery Point for VMs. Recover Point for VMs. It's a different appliance. It's still virtual. There's not a box anywhere. But you basically install it inside your primary infrastructure, and then you use that for replication. It's a separate tool to do replication. If you want to back stuff up, you can have a virtual instance of Avamar running. It's called VDP, vSphere Data Protection. It's still residing inside. It's still its own entity. And what's really mind-boggling, if you think about it, if you want to use those tools for protection, or Veeam for that matter, to offload the data, if you take the extreme example, which is Avamar or VDP, you're basically having a production VM potentially running, I'm going to do it a little bit caricated, a production VM running here, backing up to a virtual backup appliance that's running right next to it. That means on the same node, potentially, you're reading data one place to write it to the same node in a different place. And when you have to recover it, you have to transfer all that data back. It's completely ludicrous, if you ask me. But that's what it is. So yes, do they have data protection built in? They would claim yes, but now you know what it is. Do they have deduplication built in? Yes. When does it run? If there are enough resources. So the more load you put on your critical MS SQL database, the less is the likelihood that you get your deduplication on your data. Doesn't make any sense. So that's the really big difference. And obviously, if you're running a lot of remote applications, there are no, let's call them inter-data center deduplication going on. So you would need some sort of optimizing engine if you want to send data between different data centers. And as I just told you, it's all built into our appliance. So that's the big difference. So yes, you did get some moving parts eliminated, but far from all. Far from it. I'm not going to take too long showing you this stuff because Thomas is going to demo it anyway. I'm just going to do like this and this. Basically says all SimpliVity actions, it says here, and then this is what you can do. You can do a little more. Aina knows this. But this is, in your day-to-day operations, this is what you can do. It's pretty simple. And Thomas is going to show you exactly how simple it is. But again, back to the stuff we already showed you. There are no infrastructure management going on, which is the important thing. And then you could also argue that the ease of doing these things actually make them a lot more achievable. So if you think about it, can you do synchronous replication and disaster recovery using your traditional data center stack? Of course you can. You've been doing it for 15 years. But is there anyone here who would argue that it's really, really easy? Most people wouldn't. Even with skilled resources. I've known some of the biggest service providers in Denmark. They have petabytes and petabytes of flash storage, 10, 20,000 VMs. Nobody has ever told me this was easy. And when I tell them about this, a little light bulb normally ticks on, because this is just so much simpler. Okay, so in terms of where we propose you use our solution, data center consolidation is a really good use case. Basically, take all the stack I showed you before and just boil it down to a few SimpliVity boxes like Azure has done, and then you're good to go. If you have, it stands for remote offices, branch offices, so different locations out throughout the world or the country for that matter, then it's a really good use case because it's simple to manage. It's always optimized in the data transport. So there's a lot of savings in bandwidth and stuff that could actually easily pay for the SimpliVity solution. And then VDI is a primary use case as well. That's, we can run, depending on the workloads and the type of virtual desk infrastructure, then maybe a couple of hundred VMs or virtual desktops on one node. And then if you have 500, you need 3 nodes. So this much in a rack, maybe. So that's essentially a good use case. I'll say the other ones are mostly something you can derive from some of this, mostly this. Tier 1 applications, obviously you're going to run that in your data center. Unless you're moving it into the cloud. So our cloud integration is not native. I'll say for now, it's more on the orchestration part. So if you want to put yourself in a situation where you can move workloads to and from our infrastructure, then it's not something we can facilitate as such, but what we can do is that we can free up the resources that will allow you to do that automation. Because just remember one thing, maybe it wasn't completely clear. A virtual machine in our world will do exactly all the same things that you do in your normal VMware environment. So if you want to take that VM and move it somewhere, you can do it. If you want to run external backups for that matter, if you have some sort of requirement, it'll work just as any other VMware integrated solution. So that's basically how we work. If you just see the VMs, you can do whatever you want with them. Here's a few of our reference customers. We have Usher, obviously. We also have Nuhegi, who's using it for their service provider business. Premise, also a small reseller service provider here. Same thing with Genia in Denmark. Not going to say too much because Aina is going to tell you exactly what Usher is doing. So if I have to summarize this, I would say, obviously you can justify SimpliVity investment in many different ways. Either it could be one, or it can be all, or a subset of these drivers that would basically justify the investment. So what most really like is the simple management. This could be done with very few resources. Even big data centers, thousands of VMs, you can manage with very few resources. That's compelling to most organizations because they're not looking to get more people to manage infrastructure, much rather get the resources to do something that develops the business instead. But I'll say also the sheer service improvement. So we're not going to speak too much about architectures today, but one of the sheer things that we always would propose is a dual center architecture, like disaster recovery infrastructure. In our view, that will always give you 2 backup copies, for instance. Always. So most organizations today, if they have a backup solution in place, they have 1 backup in 1 location. Maybe it's off-site, but it's still 1 copy. If that copy for some reason disappears, you lose your whole application history. And that's one of the first things you solve with SimpliVity. So you always have 2 copies of your backups. And you actually have 2 copies of all your data. Something we discussed today. You can always recover all your data because we always have 2 copies of it, regardless. But I'll say this is basically summarizing some of the things we talked about. And I'd like to end with this one, because if you think you're too busy, maybe there's a reason. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but I think it's a good one. Everybody's busy. Sometimes you have to stop and kind of wonder if are we spending our time doing the right things? So I would definitely say SimpliVity is a good way to change that, and hopefully this has made it somewhat compelling. Do we have how much time? 3 o'clock was the break? We do the break now then? Good. All right. Demo is next, I think, if I do like this. And coffee break.
Okay, I guess we should be ready. Everyone hopefully has a coffee. So I think for the next 20 to maybe 25 minutes, we can quickly go through the user interface and the capabilities of the system. If you have questions, just stop me in between. I'm of course trying to answer them, otherwise we'll take them. What we have here is the user interface of the environment. I think everyone who is dealing with vCenter, VMware or vSphere knows what this is. It's the standard user interface. So we try to make everything as simple as possible. So the management interface of the systems is accessible via a vCenter plugin. I'll show it in a minute. I'm currently VDI'd into some systems which run in the area of Boston in order to have some systems which we can access worldwide in order to make sure that we can do a nice demo. The other thing which is important, of course, if you like the command line interface, you can have it. So we've got quite a powerful command line interface, which of course can issue most of the commands or even more. You can use it for troubleshooting. But of course, this is the easiest way to manage the environment. The other thing which is certainly important, once we go to other hypervisors, we will use the predominant user interface. Once you go to Hyper-V, for instance, it will be SCVMM. So what we see here is the environment, and there's one nice little logo from SimpliVity. So this is something which gives access to the SimpliVity Federation. And I quickly click on it. We see a couple of menu items which we can use in order to make sure that we understand different environments. Of course, there's some kind of greeting. The interesting piece is the topology. Currently, it's a very easy topology which we have. So it's a so-called 2+1 setup. So we've got an Athens cluster which has 2 OmniCube systems. We've got another one, this is a +1, it's called the St. Louis cluster, which is connected via a wide area network. Of course, in this case, we didn't put too much effort into simulating the wide area network. It's just to explain the principles. The interesting piece certainly is, as soon as we have, or one system gives you the functionality which Peter has been describing initially, once you add a second system, you automatically have high availability. So each piece of data will be mirrored to the other system. So if you've got a main system where a VM is running, once you write the data, it's automatically copied to the other side. And we then make sure that once the block is accepted on the other system, it will be reported back to the hypervisor, and then the data is clean. So that's certainly an interesting piece. You as well can use it to set up scratch clusters. So once you put the systems which are in the same local environment, so Athens is called local federation, St. Louis is called a local federation, and both together build a global federation. Of course, you can set it up in a way that you have several locations, which is certainly important in an internationally distributed environment, or if you have production areas where you want to have enough horsepower to run your production workloads, and of course have high availability in these environments. That's certainly important. That's the topology. So what we as well can do here, once you look into the topology, we can look into the clusters. So the Athens cluster is one thing. If we right-click on this, we usually get a set of context menus. I shouldn't do it too fast. So, and I think there's a very important piece which is called view capacity. It's a so-called marketing slide. So on the left side, you see the logical capacity of the system. This is what is reported to the hypervisor. The hypervisor thinks it has something like 8.3 terabyte of working sets saved. We've got 182 terabytes of local backups and 173 terabytes of remote backups, so which have been delivered from other sites. In total, approximately 360 terabytes of data, which is a lot for 3 systems, which have just a footprint of 2 rack units each. Of course, this is a demo environment. We do a lot of activities which are similar. There's not a lot of activity happening on the systems, so we get an extremely high efficiency. The dedupe is very high because we do a lot of cloning jobs on the VMs. Compression is 1.5, which is usually the value I would expect for production environments in terms of compression. So very high efficiency. In reality, we only have a use capacity of 4.3 terabytes. So this gives a little bit of an overview. The interesting piece is the efficiency goes up massively as soon as the backups will be calculated in the game. For working sets, I'm very conservative. Usually I use values between 1.3 and 2 or 2.25 when I calculate the disk space requirements for working sets. As soon as you kick in the backups, it can look like this. So the first larger customer I had in early 2014, where we now have more than 30 systems implemented in there. After 2 months, I had a look at the systems. They already had backup savings at about 7 petabytes. And compared with a working set size of 55 terabytes, which is quite big for a small enterprise. But the interesting piece is they were shooting backups once a day. They had anything you can imagine from file servers, Exchange servers, SQL servers in that. And we had a very good comparison because they still wanted to rely on legacy backup. So I did a chaining of the systems, collected the backups in one central backup location, and then wrote some scripts to put this on Veeam servers, and they continued to buy disk space for the Veeam server. So I think it was a very good comparison. In the meantime, I think they have retired the Veeam solution in this environment because of the data efficiency. So that's certainly an interesting piece. If we go back to the cluster view, or at least to the data center view, so everyone should be familiar with how the things are working because it's a normal management environment. Peter initially was, of course, mentioning the backup policies. So when you create an environment, part of the game is to create a data store where the VMs are residing. The interesting piece is once you create a data store, the first data store, the system asks for assigning and creating a backup policy. So no VM in this environment will be unprotected unless you create an empty backup policy. So if you want to screw it, you can do it, but from the principle, usually everything is protected. The other interesting part is we have different types of backup policies. So there's a bronze daily backup policy, which usually is the default policy. So here's fixed default policy. If you go onto a policy and you go into the editor, you can have some more details on that. So what you can do is you can create a new rule, tell the system what to do and in which frequency to shoot the backups. You can define the retention policy. You can tell the system where to send the backup, either local, or you can define it where to send the data in specifics. Of course, there are some advanced functionality. Initially, we had everything in one screen, so people clicked everything, and this sometimes can create some problems if you just do an application consistent backup every 5 minutes. So I think this is something I definitely would not recommend, but it's theoretically possible. Of course, it has a big impact on the application, so I would not do it. We have some customers who shoot a backup every 10, 15 minutes. This is something you wouldn't do in a classic, normal environment, but if you have a development environment, if you have a gambling platform where you collect billing data, it sometimes makes sense to shoot backups quite frequently. The interesting piece as well is, of course, you can define a retention period, and of course, you can create very specific backup policies which you assign to specific VMs. So in general, you will assign a default policy to a data store. So each VM which is created inside that data store or which will be moved into that data store inherits this backup policy. You would then have a very important machine where you say, I want to have a backup every hour instead of every 6 hours and retain it for maybe 5 hours or 6 hours if something goes wrong. You can assign this specific policy to a specific VM, which of course makes it very handy to organize the environment. From the other functionality, which certainly is interesting, let me go to the normal host and cluster view. If we expand these views, so let's have a look at the Athens cluster. There's a couple of VMs where I can play around with, so maybe let's have a look at this VM. The summary of the VM looks as follows. We've got a thin provisioning, but if you look at the VM hardware and at the inventory, just let me click it. So it's, I think the interesting piece is the second hard disk with 0.5 terabyte of data. What I can do here, of course, usually everything is policy driven. The other thing which is very important is that we are doing everything around the VM. So the system itself is VM centric. Everything here from the user interface and from the systems design is created in a fashion that you have to you can focus on your VMs. You don't have to think about loons, you don't have to think about disks, you just think about the data store and the VMs and you assign policies. And of course, there's a couple of specific functions which you can trigger using either the VRA, you can use it with UCSD, or of course, you can trigger it with the context menu. And there's a couple of different commands you can use. You can trigger a manual backup. Usually the backups are triggered with the policy. You can clone a VM. If the VM is switched off, you can use the VAI integration to trigger this with a normal VM command. Otherwise, we can trigger it with our commands. You can use our technology to move the virtual VM, the virtual machines, which means that we have a metadata layer in between the physical disk layer and the hypervisor. So on top of the system, we present our data stores via NFS. So VMware thinks everything is normal. With Hyper-V, it will be SMBv3. Underneath, there's a presentation layer, and underneath that, there's a so-called data management layer. Underneath, there's an object file system. So what we do is we have a building plan for the VMs in the data management layer. If you want to shoot the full backup of a VM, you just take a copy of the metadata. If you want to restore this VM, you just register this bucket again back to the hypervisor. If you want to move this data, the system just compares the data which is ready maybe in Athens with the data which is present in St. Louis. So you remember the 2+1 configuration we have here. System starts comparing, finds out, okay, a couple of blocks are missing. These pieces of data will be transmitted, the building plan will be put together on the other side, and the VM will be registered back to the system. We as well can use this technology to rapidly clone a VM. And each of these commands can be triggered via RESTful API. So you can build your own management environment in order to make sure that it as well fits your needs. So what I can do now is I will trigger, let's say, a backup of the VM. So I can trigger a manual backup. If I don't do anything, the systems will take a standard name with a timestamp. I can tell the system do a local backup or send it to a certain cluster, but in this case I just want to do a local backup. System shoots a backup in the backend. You see this is already done. I just had to take a copy of the metadata. This is saved in the SimpliVity data store, which is not physically visible to the hypervisor. It's only visible via our management platform, which is important when it comes to some interesting crypto attacks or other things. You're protected because this is not accessible to anything which is taken care of by the normal operating system of a VM. So what we can do now as well is we can take a full clone of the VM. I trigger this because I want to build up maybe a demo environment. I need to have a couple of Exchange servers or systems running, for instance, jet stress with larger disks to make sure whether the system is delivering the right I/O profile. Usually it takes some time if you have to create big VMs. What I'll do now is I issue the job for cloning the VM. So usually when we at 33% here, our job is done. The rest is registering the data to the vCenter and registering this as well back to the hypervisor. And voila. I just cloned the VM with the size of 540 gigabytes of data, registered it back. Of course, I can script it if I have a DNS or DHCP access for the system, automatically can collect its IP address once I fire it up, and I can start playing around with this. Of course, and with that, I can really quickly set up an environment for test dev. I can use this as well for setting up a lot of clones when I create a VDI environment. What we as well can do here is take our technology in order to move this data to a different site. So this can be used for provisioning VMs to outside locations or for data migration. So what you can do is the first initial backup or data transfer between, here in this case, Athens and St. Louis will take some time. Because when you have systems which are not warmed up, which is cold data, they have to compare all the data. If you create some VMs which maybe are derived from a Windows 2012 template or Windows, whatever you want to use in this environment template, this algorithm which we use for DTP compression converges with the same metadata and with the same segments once you let it run through the processor. So you can pre-warm the systems, or if you want to make sure that you already have a very good state between two systems, if you want to send one system to an oil rig or to a very remote location which is maybe only connected via satellite link, you pre-warm the systems, you let a couple of backups job run, send the systems out. The same is something what you can do if you want to migrate data. You have an outbound location which you want to move into your own data center. You start ingesting the VMs into our environment from existing ESXi host. You start maybe some backup jobs, and at a certain point in time you take a break, and then you start a SimpliVity rapid move of the data to the core data center. So this is the name of the VM I've just have created with the clone. I'm currently in the Athens cluster, and then I will decide maybe to move it to the first data store in St. Louis, and I can kick off this job. So the system starts comparing the pieces of data on both sides. So the probability at the moment is quite high that I already have quite similar data on the other side, since my colleagues worldwide are playing with the system, and we've got a couple of backup policies running. So I think that's certainly very important. So the system now starts comparing both sides. It's looking for data blocks which are not known to the other side, prepares them, transmits the data blocks, and once this is clean, the system deregisters the VM on the Athens side and will register the VM on the St. Louis side. And then, of course, you have used a rapid move to move a workload from A to B. So what we add with our technology is data mobility in this environment. This certainly will take some time. Usually the first few percent take a while, and then suddenly it goes very quickly. Is this so far comprehensive? Are there any questions regarding the technology and how it works? And as Peter was mentioning initially, so I worked for a WAN optimization company before, so I think I know what I'm talking about. The important piece is when it comes to disaster recovery, that was a very good use case for WAN optimization. In this case, you don't need it anymore because the data already has the right format, which means the data is deduped and compressed. So if you take a WAN optimization controller in between, you will not see a lot of data reduction. What you eventually can do, you can play around with UDP blast, you can play around with technologies which use quality of service in order to improve the transmission speed, but otherwise you don't need it. If you want to do application consolidation, that's something which we can do on our systems, but of course you still can add some virtual WAN optimization in order to make sure that the application gets accelerated. But when it comes to the disaster recovery piece, it's obsolete, you don't need it anymore because the functionality is virtually built in here. So what you see here, whilst I was talking, the system has completed a transfer, and if we go to the other inventory, usually the VM should show up. If I expand this, so here's the clone, and I have delivered a 540 gigabyte VM from Athens to St. Louis whilst I was talking. Of course, this is connected in one rack. I guess we have a normal switched line connection in between, but if you have a steady state in an environment with an MPLS or Internet VPN link, which is not just 128 kilobits, it can go quite fast, and of course the transmission time is of course dependent on the change rate. If you have moderate change rates, these algorithms will converge quite quickly. If you have fully encrypted data, this is a different discussion, which is, I think, kind of logical. Good. The other things, what you can do is, we've got, of course, some associated or additional functionality which is built in to the environment. So what we can do is we can take the catalog and we can use single file restore, for instance. So I think I will not show it in detail, but this is certainly an interesting function. When you want to do single file restore, what we can do is we can take an older backup of a VM and search for a file or a directory which I want to recover and put this as a CD-ROM drive into the VM so that the user can recover his data which he's using. Of course, this needs to be then done by the IT help desk in order to make sure that people get the right backups mounted, because I would not allow everyone to access this user interface, because you can easily delete VMs. So this is the catalog. If we, for instance, look at the backups, or maybe I take the backup catalog of Athens, because I initially was taking a backup here. If we look into the backup catalog, it goes up here. We put a lot of effort into making this user interface a little bit nicer, which means that it's easier to use. So if we see this backup here, I can easily restore files, which means that I'm looking for the catalog, using for the directory or the files which I want to restore. And once this is issued, this will be presented as a DVD drive into the VM, and the user can restore his files. And of course, what I as well can do is I can restore this VM to the Athens cluster once I did something wrong. So I can take a different name. So maybe I as a Danish keyboard, I need to get used to the location of the underscore. Take a different name. Then, of course, I can quickly restore this VM once I screwed something up or I developed something and I want to go back to a older backup. If I have a high backup frequency, I do not lose too much data, and you see the backup has been restored in almost no time. So it makes it really very easy to recover from the scratch if something goes wrong. If you have development environments, it goes very quickly. Or in the case of a disaster, you can use this technology. For instance, if I would have moved this backup to St. Louis, you then, of course, start a script and you register the VM back to St. Louis, and you VDI into the machine or you own RDP into the machine, you can continue working whilst you work maybe on a catastrophic failure which you had in Athens. This can be automated with a software tool which we call RapidDR, which can replace an SRM, for instance, which makes it very easy for you to recover smaller sites. The other question is how you want to do the networking design. Of course, you can adopt the rules in order to cover different address spaces. What I personally find very interesting is to have a closer look, for instance, at VXLAN or similar technologies. I know we have been working almost 20 years on getting layer 3 networks and replace hubs and switches, which work on layer 2. But in the meantime, I think it's quite interesting if you have dispersed data centers to use VXLANs to create layer 2 domain between different locations. Can be very handy in the case of disaster recovery, can be very interesting if you have to move VMs around quite often and do not want to have issues when it comes to the IP addressing. Okay, so I think I was quite clear with my 25 minutes. Are there any additional questions? Did you see enough?
Góðan daginn, Einar heiti ég. Ég ætla aðeins að fara yfir hérna hvernig Össur hefur verið að gera hlutina, hvernig við höfum verið að nota SimpliVity platformið, og við ætlum að hafa þetta á íslensku þannig að þeir skilja ekkert hvað við erum að tala um. Og ef það einhverjar spurningar eitthvað svona sem að einhver gæti ekki viljað spyrja framleiðandann, þá bara geti beint í til okkar. Við byrjuðum að skoða SimpliVity í nóvember. Þá vorum við komin á ákveðinn stað með umhverfið. Össur í heild bara var opin kerfi höfðu sett upp alveg nýtt umhverfið 5 árum áður, og það var bara komið að því að það þurfti að fara að endurnýja. Og það snýr ekki bara að vélunum, það var raunverulega bara komin tími. Og hérna nóvember 2015 þá vorum við með þessa standardlausn sem flestir að keyra í dag. Við vorum með einhverja bleitsassa, við vorum með þessa standard HP og Cisco Swissa, við vorum með bara 2 eða 3 HP diskastöður, við vorum með gamla eldveggi, og það vantaði að fara af stað. Við vorum með 5 skápa sem voru allir í notkun, 5 fulla skápa af dóti, og það var búið að frátaka 2 fyrir okkur til þess að geta fara að stækka meira. Og þetta var staðan í aðal datacentrun okkar. Í DR-sætun okkar þá vorum við líka með HP blöð, við vorum með HP diskastæður og HP Swissa, Cisco búnað, og þetta var vandamál hjá okkur. Það var hluti af umhverfinu sem vissulega var hægt að recovera yfir á DR-sætun okkar, en það var of lítill hluti miðað við allar integrationar sem við búið að gera, að þegar við vorum búin að taka þetta út, þá töldum við að við gætum recoverað 30% af umhverfinu okkar. Og það var nokkuð svona generous tala. En þetta var hluti af þessum dræfurum sem að voru undir því að fara af stað í einhvers konar hyperconverged infrastruktúr. Hvað stóð okkur til boða? Við töluðum við flesta vendorna hérna, og bara að halda fram og nota HP. Það var ein lausn. Auðveldasta lausnin sem við horfðum á, það var einfaldlega bara að kaupa 3-par og stinga beint aftan í HP Blade Centerin. Það bara virkað. Það var lítið mál, við hefum getað stækkað, en við hefum ennþá verið með þennan legacy infrastruktúr. Þetta hefði ekki lagað eða hjálpað okkur í DR, það var fullt af göllum við að halda áfram að vera bara í þessari gömlu leið sem að við margir í dag ennþá í. Við skoðum á tíma að smíða okkar eigið Hyper-V, það fara bara í Supermicro, kaupa þetta sjálfur, setja saman. Lítið teymi, það hefði tekið okkur svakalegan tíma að gera þetta sjálfur og þetta tiltölulega flókið. Þetta náttúrulega nýja buzzwordið fyrir utan cloud, en ef þú setur cloud fyrir framan þetta þá verður menn alveg bara spenntir. Það eru nokkri byrgjar á bak við þetta. Við skoðum 2 byrgja svona einhverju viti, en það var eiginlega ekki þegar maður var búinn að skoða SimpliVity almennilega og gera sér grein fyrir hvernig þeir gera hlutina, að þá eiginlega ekkert, það var eiginlega aldrei spurning. Og það var þetta hérna sem að skiptir svolítið máli og mér hefur alltaf fundist SimpliVity downplaya þetta rosa mikið. Einhver hluta vegna þá tala þeir ekki endilega accelerator-kortið. En accelerator-kortið gerir það að verkum að þeir eru ekki að éta upp mikla computer-resursa frá vélinni sjálfri. Ef þið farið í einhverja aðra hyperconverged-lausn sem software only, þá verið að éta upp CPU-resursa mjög mikið. SimpliVity leysti þetta í korti og það mjög mikilvægt. Við vitum hins vegar að þeir eru að vinna í því að fara í software only, af því örgjörðarnir eru orðnir margfalt betri heldur en þegar þeir byrjuðu 2009. En þetta stór kostur, sérstaklega úr með stór SQL umhverfi, að geta keypt fáa kjarna og nota accelerator kortið þeirra til þess að offloada þeirra vinnu, en þá sparar mikið í leyfiskostnaði. Og þetta, við fórum í 6 kjarna vélar fyrir SQL-inu okkur til dæmis. SimpliVity backup. Við erum með í dag 3 klöstera. Við erum með standardklösterin okkar, þar sem að allt venjulega dótið okkar bara vélarnar, þetta basic stuff. Síðan erum við með SQL klöster og ástæðan fyrir splittinu leyfismál. Ef þú ferð í, leyfin sem við erum með eru core-leyfi. Ef þú ferð í standardklösterin hjá okkur, þá hann með marga kjarna. Og ef þú kombinar þessi 2 workload, þá þarfst að licensa allt sem SQL-in getur snert. Með því að splitta þessu upp, þá þurfum við bara að kaupa leyfi hérna fyrir SQL-in, fyrir kjarnana sem eru þar. Og við einfaldlega fengum örgjörfa sem mjög hátt fríkvæmsaðir, en með mjög fáa kjarna til þess að leysa þetta. En varðandi backupin, í standardklösturnum, mjög auðvelt að eiga við backup. Eins og maður var að sýna á hann, þegar við sáum þetta fyrst, og þetta eitthvað demo-umhverfi sem optimized til þess að sýna nákvæmlega þessa hluti. En við erum búin að prófa þetta. Við erum búin að restóra vélum á milli heimsálfa, frá Bandaríkjunum til Evrópu og aftur tilbaka. Og það ekkert mál. Data, þegar maður var að tala heitt versus kalt data, þú ert með umhverfi sem nokkurn veginn eins sitt hvoru megin. Þú ert að keyra nav eða þú ert að keyra fælþjóna og þetta data alltaf til báðum megin. Þannig að þegar við erum að flakka með vélar á milli, það bara tiltölulega einfalt, tekur stuttan tíma og backupin hröð. Það sem frábært, annað sem þeir mættu koma betur inn á, það eins og flesti kerfisstjórar vita í dag, þegar þú deployar vél og þú gleymir að biðja að setja henni í einhvers konar retention policy, backup policy eða eitthvað slíkt. Hvað gerist þá þegar einhver kemur og biður backup? Ekki til. Og þá þarf einhver að finna út hvernig í andskotum á að redda því. En hjá þeim, þá þú býr til datastórið og setur backup policy á datastórið. Allar vélar sem verða til í framtíðinni munu erfa þessa policy default. Alveg sama hvað. Það mun aldrei aftur koma fyrir að þú eigir ekkert backup af vél. Þetta gerist sjálfkrafa þegar þú býr til vélina. Þetta fyrir mér sem kerfisstjóra, þetta mjög mikilvægt. En það eins og það allavega ein regla á vélinni. Og ef að default policy bara að taka local backup eins og sólhring, þá það bara komið. Þá áttu til afrit. SQL cluster, við höfum lent í smá vandamálum með vélarnar hjá okkur. Við erum varðandi afritunartöku. Þetta þyngra að taka afrit af SQL-um. Þetta virkar og við erum búnir að fá þetta til þess að fungera almennilega. Við lentum í vandamálum í upphafi, En þeir eru mjög responsífir að aðstofa og hjálpa mann að komast yfir þessa hóla sem að koma upp. Og í initial deploymentinu hjá okkur til dæmis, ég man ekki hvað við stofnuðum 15-16 mála eitthvað svoleiðis, svona 3/4 hluta af þessum málum voru leyst í fyrstu snertingu við að hringja í supporteskíðanum. Án þess að þurfa að bíða eftir einhverjum fjandana hjá þeim. Þeir eru með mjög qualified staff sem að sinna þegar þú hringir inn. Og það í svona dæmi þá það skiptir svolítið miklu máli sko. En já, þetta er eins og NAV hjá okkur, ég held við sem að taka afrit núna á 30 mínútna fresti. Við erum ekki að taka logafrit, við tökum bara afrit á hálftíma fresti. Og þetta er að fungera bara nokkuð vel sko í dag. Performance, allt sem hefur farið inn á standardklösterinn hefur sýnt bætingu. Við erum konum með allt yfir, við erum að keyra bara á SimpliVity í dag. Í SQL-unum, það er sama. Við erum konum með allar vélar yfir nema eina. Við erum með BI-vélina okkar ennþá fyrir utan. Og við þurfum að stækka umhverfið til þess að klára að koma henni inn núna því að stækkunin, það sem gerist þegar við fórum í SimpliVity er að við fórum að geta deliverað mikið hraðar sem þýðir að hinir plattformónarnir þeir komu til okkur og sagði get ég þá farið núna í dev og test og prod og verið með þetta þvert yfir línuna eins og við viljum gera þetta og bara já. Þannig að við fórum úr 300 vélum í 450 vélar á 10 mánuðum, eitthvað svoleiðis. Og upphæðlega gerðum við ráð fyrir svona 30-35% aukningu í stækkun umhverfi. Löngu konur yfir það og umhverfið er ennþá að stækka því að það er auðvelt fyrir okkur að delivera resursum og bara delivera IT út í fíldi til okkar. Þegar einhver kemur til okkar, við erum snöggir, við erum responsive að koma því sem fólk er að biðja út til þeirra. Þannig að þau geta haldið áfram með sína vinnu. Þannig að allt sem heitir shadow IT, það hefur farið að minnka hjá okkur. Við erum ekki lengur í sömu slagsmálum við R&D-deildir og deildir út allt fyrirtæki sem segja bara ef þú getur ekki gert það, ferðu bara upp í klátið. Við erum að ná þessu aftur inn til okkar. Við erum að ná stjórninni á okkar umhverfi. Og það er mjög mikilvægt. Og það er eitthvað sem SimpliVity gerir. Það gerir manni kleift að vera snöggur. Og eins og segja, þetta skiptir máli sko. Hérna erum við komin í dag. Þetta er mynd sem ég tók síðast eða þar síðast sem ég var úti. Við fórum semst úr 5 skápum. Við erum komin í 2. Og við raunverulega höfum pláss til þess að vera bara í einum með allt okkar. Sitt hvor megin við hafið. Við erum með einni viðbútt til þess að passa upp á svona ef við skildum fara að springa út. Ef við kaupum eitthvað risastórt þá höfum við pláss við hliðina sem er gott. Við erum með 4 standardhósta. Við erum með 3 SQL-hósta sem sjá allt okkar. Við erum með yfir 700 ganggrunna og við erum að replikera allt sem er til í Bandaríkjunum er líka til í Evrópu. Og allt sem er til í Evrópu er líka til í Bandaríkjunum í datacentrinu hjá okkur. Og það er einn af þessum hlutum sem við lögðum mikið upp úr varðandi DR hjá okkur að við getum feilað öllu umhverfinu á bara þvert yfir hafið. Þetta er eitthvað sem við erum að vinna í að testa og það nýji hugbúnaðurinn frá þeim kemur þar inn á þann hluta sko. En pælingin er sem sagt að ef eitthvað kemur upp á að þá er ekkert eldra en 24 tíma gamalt sem við erum að recovera yfir á. Og varðandi net og svoleiðis, við fórum og fengum okkur eigin yfirtölur. Við erum með eldveggi sem supporta shards eða mismunandi kontekst sitt hvoru megin. Þannig að allt sem við gerum í bandaríska eldvegnum okkar er replikerað yfir til Evrópu. Þannig að ef eitthvað kemur fyrir, þá feilum við ekki bara kompjútinu, heldur við feilum ytrirtölunum okkar, eldvegnum okkar og öllum stakknum sem þarf að vera til þess að virki, það verður allt sent yfir hafið. Sem þýðir að við erum ekki lengur dependent á einhverju datacenter einhvers staðar. Við getum fært okkur á þess að sé mikið vesen. Þetta er mjög mikilvægt. Við höfum nægilega mikla rýmd báðum megin til þess að keyra allan infrastruktúrinn okkar. Og þetta er bara eins og við hönnuðum umhverfið upphafi út af disaster recovery requirements. Við erum að byrja núna, við ætluðum að vera búnir með DR-prófunir en Össur ákvaða að fara að kaupa fleiri fyrirtæki og það þarf að integrera þau. Þannig að við svona tókum smá sveig til þess að klára það dæmi. En þetta það töluverður sparnar á bak við þetta. Við erum að horfa á til dæmis rekstur á backupum hjá okkur. Það hrundi þegar við fórum yfir SimpliVity. Það að taka afrit, fylgjast með afritum, vissulega þarf að gera þetta. En að reka SimpliVity backup versus DPM, það ekki eins og hægt að bera þetta saman. Að fylgjast með afritunarreglunum, passa upp á afritin, það er bara, not even close. Það er ótrúlegur munur að fylgjast með þessu. En þetta er össur í dag. Og við erum að halda áfram að stækka. Umhverfið það er að virka mjög vel fyrir okkur. Og ég mæli eindregið með þessu. Ef þið hafa einhverjar spurningar, það er bara endilega spyrja. Eitthvað? Ef þið viljið tala við mig eftir fundin eða eitthvað, þá getið þið örugglega fengið e-mail og þið getið skotið á mig spurningum og ég náttúrulega er ekki að selja neitt, þannig að ég get örugglega svarað öðruvísi heldur en kannski SimpliVity eða opin kerfi. Þannig að endilega bara spyrja. Já, það er eitt sem er hluti af þessu sem að Peter kom inn á áðan. Að validation á öllu firmware og öllum stakknum raunverulega er á þeirra ábyrgð. En það á móti kemur því líka að við erum til dæmis í VMware 6 núna. Við hefðum viljað vera farnir í 6.5. Við getum það ekki fyrir að það er búið að validera á móti öllu hardverinu sem við erum með. En þeir sjá alfarið að validera öll firmware áður en það fyrir deployment. Síðan downloadar þú, ef þú vilt gera þetta sjálfur, þá downloadar þú pakka sem þú keyrir inn á vélina og það uppfærir í allar réttar útgáfur miðað við það sem þeir eru búin að fyrirfram samþykkja, sem virka með þeirra lausn, með þeirra hardveri. Við þurfum ekki að eyða tíma í þetta. Þetta er bara eitt pakkið sem þú sækir ef þú vilt gera þetta sjálfur. En eins og support-samningurinn okkar við þá er til dæmis núna að við stofnum bara case og segjum, hey, er komið nýtt firmware? Þegar við sjáum það inn á portalnum og það kemur, já, ok, ég má ekki að fara í að uppfæra bara allar vélarnar. Síðan annarkvort hleypir þú þeim inn í VPN og þú treystir þeim vel, eða þá að þú getur gert þetta með þeim í WebEx eða einhverjum fjallanum. En þeir sjá þetta.
Þetta var að færa úr gamla umhverfinu yfir í nýja. Þú að gera þetta einu rikk eða gáttu að gera þetta?
Við keyrðum umhverfin samhliða í 6 mánuði með við vorum að skala okkur niður. Þannig að þau voru bara lifandi hlið við hlið, sko. Síðan bara vorum við að skópla vélum yfir. Og síðan þetta tók okkur nokkra mánuði að klára að færa. Sem bara á einu tímapunkti og bara slöktum við öllu gamla dótinu.
Það bættu bara við nóður en jafn nóður.
Þegar við keyptum umhverfið, þá keyptum við alla nóðurnar á sama tíma. Við tókum allt umhverfið inn á sama tíma. Við fórum út í sikkur datacenterið og preparaðum þetta og komum þessi gang, fórum síðan SimpliVity og síðan var farið að staða að konverta. Því þetta var náttúrulega Hyper-V. Þá notuðum við bara VMware konverterinn, átum yfir allar vélarnar. Og í flestum tilvikum að þá var það þannig að niðri tíma var kannski 20-30 sekúndur að meðan þú veist að flakka á milli og disabla og enabla netspjöld og eitthvað. En þetta tekur óheyrilega stuttan tíma miðað við stærðina á umhverfinu og fjöldan. Að þá þetta er mjög einfalt í rekstri.
Nú voru það að bæta við fyrirtækjum, mikið mál að setja það inn í þetta?
Nei, ferli sem við erum reynulega að prófa núna og settum upp er að við tókum SimpliVity nóðu. Við erum með 2 í gangi núna, einir í Frakklandi og einir í Svíþjóð, bara inn í datacentrunum hjá þeim fyrirtækjum. Við tökum allar vélarnar sem eru keyrandi á þeirra hardware í dag, tökum backupöðum, konvertuðum raunverulega inn á SimpliVity búnaði, við keyrum það þar í einhvern smá tíma og meðan við erum að klára að taka backup af öllu yfir línuna. Síðan kemur bara cut-over event, þar sem við segjum bara, heyrðu, nú bara komið tími og þá tökum við bara servernetið þeirra, búttum því upp í datacentrunni okkur, kveikjum á öllum vélunum sem við eigum fersk afrit af okkar megin. Þannig að það sem svona migration toolkit að þá er þetta líklega það besta sem ég hef séð. Þegar þú ert að færa, eins og segir, þú tekur bara alla vélarnar sem þeir eiga, kemur inn á SimpliVity nóðuna, stillir backup policy-inu til þess að taka backup öllum sem vélum, lokal og remote, sendir allt yfir vanið og maður hefur verið að horfa á vélar sem eru 2, 3, 4, 500 ter, gig fyrir ekki, og að taka það yfir, að það bara, hún tekur metadata, ber saman hvað á ég til, nánast allt þetta data eins, og 500 gig vél, kannski 1 gig sem fer yfir línuna. Og það bara, maður horfir á þetta bara, hvernig í helvítinu gera þetta? En datað til. Það til hinum megin. Og þú ert með stokk Windows-vél og þú ert að transfera hann á milli og þú deployar vél og kemur hann í gang og segir, heyrðu, ég ætla að keyra hana kannski hérna hinum megin. Þú ætlar að henda hann á milli, bara 40 meg á milli. Það ótrúlegt að sjá hvernig þeir vinna með data. Eitt varðandi efficiency, data efficiency, þeir gefa sér 90% data efficiency. Það rosa mismunandi eftir data. SQL data ekki svo mikið, fileserver data svakalegt.
Compression í 2,1.
Já, compression hjá okkur 2,1 dag, sem hærra heldur en það sem þeir segja. En á móti kemur að dedupið minna. Og ef að fólk með compression á disk level inni í Windowsinu, þá þarf að slökkva á því. Það algjörlega skemmir það sem SimpliVity að gera. Þannig ef menn að keyra compression á fileserver eða eitthvað svoleiðis, af einhver ástæðu, það þarf að taka það burt. Af því að þegar að það breytist eitthvað inn í kompressaða stakknum Windows megin, þá horfir SimpliVity á það eins og það hefur verið að breyta disknum. Og þá það ekki gott. Þá það backupin mjög stór, mjög hratt. Já. Nei. Já, núna. Já, það sem við erum búin að gera, við shipum nóðun út. Nú erum við bara að taka, við erum að keyra VMware konverterinn til að taka vélarnar inn á SimpliVity nóðuna. Leiðu það fer inn á SimpliVity nóðuna, þá kikkar í gang backup policy-an sem á datastórinu og hægt og rólega erum við að streyma öll datanu þeirra yfir í datacentrið okkar. Þegar við síðan ákveðum að keyra cutoverið, þá tökum við 1 loka backup, slökkum öllum vélanum öðrum megin og kveikjum á þeim hinn megin. Þú getur það ef þú vilt skipta yfir til á vilni. Já, en það sem við ætlum að gera til þess að einfalda þetta fyrir notendur ennþá meira, það bara að það verður bara svona, power down, power up. Og tökum við neti með og þá ekkert, þú þarft ekki einu svona hugsa út í hvernig þetta lítur út fyrir klientin hinum megin. Af því það engin breyting, hvorki fyrir notandan, eða pólusýður, eða útstöðin eða neitt. Hún veit hvar allt af því það allt til inn í umhverfinu í dag. Og þegar þú komið inn í datacentri á þér, þá getur þú að fara að leika þér með þetta, integrera þetta inn í þig betur eða hvort þú vilt fara með einhvers konar tröst eða hvað, alveg saman hvernig þú vilt gera það. Það mjög einfalt að fara þá leiðina.
Hvað gerur þá við SimpliVity nótuna sem eru hjá?
Viðskiptunum. Við tökum hann og sendum hann í næsta fyrirtæki sem vorum að kaupa. Það næsta skref hjá okkur. Við erum með þetta allt dreift í dag. Það sem Össur gerði með opnum kerfum fyrir einhverjum 5 árum, það var að búa til primary datacenter og síðan seinna fóru þeir í disaster recovery. Það keyrði allt út úr Bandaríkjunum. Vandamáli við að keyra þetta allt frá Washington að meirihlutan af starfsemin okkar í Kaliforníu og hinn helmingurinn af starfsemin okkar í Evrópu. Þannig að þetta var svona versti staðurinn fyrir alla að keyra þetta frá Washington. Það fengu allir jafnlélegt latency. En með því að segja bara, heyrðu, við ætlum að færa resursana sem segjum að þú starfsmaður á Íslandi, þá viljum við að resursin sem þú ert að nota sé sem næstur þér. Það næsta datacenter okkar þá í Evrópu. Þannig að stefnan okkar að taka þessar resursar sem eru á víðudreif og splitta þeim upp. Og við erum byrjaðir á þessu og þá lækkum við líka lótið á sikkur datacenterinu og gerir okkur kleift að bregðast aðeins betur við. Þetta er svona ongoing vinna hjá okkur, það tekur svolítið tíma.
Líka hardware, Dell og...
Já, við erum í dag, að því að þegar við völdum SimpliVity, að þá var HP eini stóri vendorinn sem vildi ekki bjóða upp á SimpliVity sem lausn. Þannig að við tókum Lenovo nóður, það voru ódýrastar á þeim tíma, Þetta bara hardware með software plattform og sem við erum raunverulega að kaupa software plattformið þeirra. Það er plattformið sem maður að eldast við. Við erum ekki, á þessum tíma þá vorum við ekki að horfa endilega á hardwareið. Hardware er the box. Það er allir með Intel-örgjörvar, allir með Samsung-diska í dag eða svona flestir og Crucial minni eða Samsung minni eða eitthvað. Og síðan ertu með eitthvað svona management layer sem að Lenovo og Dell og HP bjóðu upp á. Það er bara þitt preference, raunverulega. En það er lausnin frá SimpliVity. Það er hversu góð hún er. Og núna er náttúrulega komin HP sem eini vendorinn eða svona þannig. Og svona sýnist að mest allt developmenti verði áfram á HP bara. Þannig að þetta er, núna getur ekki beint valið hardware þannig, en þú færð HP hardwareið í dag og þeir eru á leiðinni þangað með þetta. En plattformið er málið. Hvað meira? Ég mæli eindregið með að þið kíkið á þetta. Ef þið eruð í hugleiðingum varðandi að skipta eða breyta, þá mæli ég eindregið með því að kíkja á SimpliVity. Þetta er fyrir okkur þetta búið að vera draumur í dós. Það er alveg ótrúlegt hvað er hægt að gera með þessa plattformi.
Hvað eru margir starfsmenn hjá þessu í dag?
Við erum komin upp í 2500. Við munum vera 3000 í lok árs á 100 locationum.
Hvað margar við stjórnir?
Við erum að gera 450 í dag og við erum eftir að integrera svona 60 vélar eitthvað slags núna inn í umhverfið í viðbót miðað við hvað er að koma frá þessum fyrirtækjum sem við höfum verið að kaupa.
Hvað er það stór?
Við erum þrír kerfistjórar og einn SQL sem er svona ígildi kerfistjóri líka, hann er að gera ansi mikið af kerfistjórnarlega töskum einfallega bara þegar við erum fáir. Og síðan erum við með dreift teymi, first level, second level út allan heim. En raunverulega þá erum við þrír og þriðji var að bætast við fyrir 2 vikum. Eða 3 vikum. Þannig að þrátt fyrir það að við séum í integration verkefnum og rekstri náttúrulega bara á umhverfinu okkar, að það að fara í SimpliVity gerir okkur kleift. Það er miklu minna umstang í kringum SimpliVity umhverfið versus gömlu standardleiðina. Það að fara með þetta allt inn í eitt box, það er mikilsvirði. Það er alveg ótrúlega mikilsvirði. Og eins og ég mæli eindregið með að kíkja á þetta ef þið hafið tíma. Ekki nema þetta að halda áfram að draga á ferundu hjólunum. Þá bara þakka ég fyrir mig.